Our speaker is Jevoid Simmons, and he is a lifelong artist and 42-year resident of Evanston, and he's going to show us paintings and carvings that reflect warmth and tranquility in the presence of turbulent times and events of the day. He will also discuss his book, which tells the story of his family's migration out of rural Alabama in the 1950s. So without further ado,
hello, everyone. Thank you to Amy Krause, who is a former colleague from Northwestern Memorial Hospital. She introduced me to the organization and invited me to come and speak with you about my art. First of all, I'd like to talk a little bit about myself. I am one of 18 children. The two oldest children died. They were premature. But I'm number 4 of those that live. And our family is from the rural South. We left Alabama in 1952 and moved to Davenport, Iowa. Now, out of all of this, there's a lot of story to be told, and I'll go into some of that in the presentation, how we ended up and why we ended up in the North. Part of what is something that was very true of so many people of color living in the rural South. I have, as was mentioned before, I've been a lifelong artist, and then some of my earliest paintings that I did was when I was in kindergarten. I actually have a couple of those, and I've painted all the time. Never really showed work. I never really considered myself an artist. I just like to make stuff. And I have to say, most of the family members unusually are artists as well. They're not that by profession, but we all make art. Even my father made art when he was younger. But we migrated to, moving from Davenport, I ended up coming to Illinois, met my wife. Before we came to Illinois, we moved to Chicago and got married here. And we have a son who's 37 years old. And as we mentioned, we've lived in Evanston for just about, oh my God, it's been 40. Jeez, okay, I won't go into all that. I'm officially old. But anyway, it's my pleasure to be here with you today. And I want to talk with you about my story, but is also in the context of a greater migration. And we're just a little piece of that. And I'll share insights into that. So, okay, the Great Migration we're talking about, and I know you've heard a lot about this, you know, the migration stories and different things that happened, that people ended up leaving the South. Well, between 1950 and 1970, 6 million Black Americans packed what they could, sometimes very quickly, and sometimes not even packing to leave. And there was a whole lot of things going on that made it necessary for them to get up and move in that fashion. But 6 million leaving the South. Now, the question is, why do they leave? I'd like to throw something out to the audience. What is your thought of why they left? Well, there's plenty of work. It was the kind of work you wanted to do. Racism, yeah. Cruelty, yeah.
Opportunity.
Opportunity.
Segregation.
Segregation, yeah. It was not a joyous place to be for people that had skin color like me. So post-Civil War, blacks were freed from slavery, but that was just the initiation of something that was a little more difficult. The Ku Klux Klan was actually started in 1865. Reconstruction period happened for a brief period of time, and over that time, deals were made where pretty much the government backed out of their business and they reestablished the new South with Jim Crow, separate but equal. And we know that there was not no equality, particularly when you couldn't vote, or you had to guess how many jelly beans were in a jar in order to vote if you were black. You had to pay poll taxes if you were black. So
We encourage you to put the mic like this closer to your mouth. We want to hear you better. Thank you.
okay. My wife always says that. Talk louder. So just to share a little of the images of what was going on during the periods, and even up into the 40s and 50s, sharecroppers. Now, this was a situation where individuals worked the land and got seed and produced the crop, and the owner of the land would share the profits of that. It never really worked out very well, and it was a subsistence existence there. Just some images of what was going on during these times as we moved into the 1900s and 20s and so on and so forth, even up into the 60s and 70s. The right to vote. Now, the interesting thing is Black Americans find themselves in a situation today where the right to vote is being restricted. And these are being done by gerrymandering and things like that. Something as basic as that liberty is being challenged. Separate, equal. Terror. The bombing. These are the 4 little girls that were killed in that bombing. 1963. Little Rock, Arkansas. What kind of courage did it take for that girl to walk through that crowd? Black folks in the back. And they could lose their seat if there weren't enough white seats. They could go and tell the black person, get up, stand. Montgomery Freedom Walkers. The Freedom Riders, these were the 3 that they found buried in Gulch. Buried, they were buried. They were killed. Yeah. This iconic bridge, the Pettus Bridge. Iconic. It's iconic because that's John Lewis on the right there. But Pettus, the bridge is named after, I believe it was a Civil War person, but the whole march was to go over across the bridge, and it became a big thing. There was a big battle where the state troopers beat John Lewis and all the others to stop them from advancing and crossing the bridge. Well, do you know? Yeah. But everything in essence was a white area.
Jevoid, excuse me.
Yeah.
I think we need to wait until the Q&A portion for us to have a microphone so everyone can hear the questions. So we'd like you to proceed as you wish. Thank you.
Between oh gosh, 1916, 15, between there and 1960, there were 3,500 lynchings that happened. Doing the math, that's about 45 people got killed every year by lynching. And those are the known lynchings that took place. There are so many that were not reported and individuals were never found, but those are documented. And so think about what that would do to the psyche of anyone trying to exist and persist, that could happen to you at any time for the slightest slight or for just fun on a Saturday night. That was the conditions that were in existence. And so the question always comes up, why did they leave? And the big question is really, why would they ever want to be there and stay? You know, the reality is there were families that were there that didn't and couldn't get out. But where situations were dire and individuals had to make an exit out, they did the best they could to get away and get to somewhere. It required planning. Sometimes it was on the fly, though. So leaving was to survive, essentially, just to have a rope thrown over a tree. And that was kind of where my family was left, with that eventuality, because that was to happen. So the primary destinations when people left were the big cities to the north, Detroit, New York, Philadelphia, and out on the West Coast for San Francisco. But as the 60s drew to a close, the movement started to dwindle in terms of the people exiting. What I want to share here is a little bit of what my story was. And my story is like so many others. In 1952, we were swept up into this whole process of having to get out to survive. These are paintings that I did for a book that I published in 2021. My father worked at a sawmill, and this was back in the country. And the boss was giving him a hard time about a job that he didn't do. He kept trying to tell him that that wasn't his work, and he wasn't being heard. The boss continued to berate him in front of the men. Finally, he said, I ought to take a pipe and bust you upside the head with it. My dad was a hothead. You know, I mean, he always wanted to keep kind of low profile because he did not want to be bothered. But he told the shop foreman, I already got a pipe. And he ran him out of the shop. And that was the start of a problem. In terms of his upbringing, my father, he was the son of a preacher, had brothers and sisters, 5 kids in the family, 1 girl. And they were very moral people, you know, taught the goodness of God and all of these things, you know. But Dad had a temper, you know, and for so many people of color, we kind of live with the stain of what was slavery. And there are always parts of that I think will always be embedded in the DNA. You know, where you are no more than the beast in the field, that kind of mentality. And your value is only in the service that you could give. And if you were not of any value, then things might happen to you. Later that night, after my dad was going home from the mill, he was stopped on the road by a group of men. And they asked him, what do you think you're doing chasing at a white man like that, boy? He said he was wrong. I did not do that work. They asked him, what do you got in that lunch pail? Dad said, if I go in it, I aim to use what's in it. You know, that pistol still is in the family. It's a long barrel 22 pistol. And so it's kind of a memento from those times for us. My brother in Davenport holds the pistol. Now, in the South, there are a lot of warm feelings between white and black people, and there were friendships that developed, and there was a protectiveness back and forth. And one of the persons that I don't know by name, I just know him as the old white man, came and warned my dad that the night riders were going to come and they were going to kill him. And he told him, you got to get out. And so that was the impetus for us having to go. Now, we didn't have a lot of money. And just to be correct here, for me, I would have been just under 1 year old at that time. This was in 1952. So in all of my art that I do in carvings, in some of them you'll see a white man, and I honor him as family because he loved my father as a friend, and he was the one who gave us the opportunity to get out of there. Not having money, there was a cow that grazed on our property. And there was a lot of times when you had just a field, you know, somebody might bring the cows over to graze. Well, we had such a cow there. And so Dad sold the cow. It wasn't his cow. But, you know, he was pretty creative about getting what he needed to make things happen. And so with that, he got a ticket for $60 for that cow and escaped out, not without providing for us and making sure we were taken care of. We ended up going, this is in the backwoods of Alabama, Greenville, Alabama. So we lived about 10 miles outside of the county seat, which was in Greenville. And so we stayed with my grandmother for about 7 months while Dad went north to prepare for us and get us up there. Now, this is a little bit of my imagination. After he got us settled in the with Grandma, he had to wait until night to get out. And I thought about him in the house by himself, waiting so he could go. In that house, there was a lot of love, a lot of memories. And I was very young, as I said at that time. But as I drew this picture, I drew it with feeling of what it might have been like. And my brother, who was older, he actually said, you know, the trundle bed that you have here, that's what we slept in. And so somewhere in my memory that was there. And I painted that, and he confirmed that. And then as an artist, you always want to play with stuff. And so the little baby sitting in the corner, the doll, that was my son's doll. You know, it's one of those, what do they call the Cabbage Patch Kids? So I brought that in there. And we played ball a lot. So some of the things that were there. So in art, sometimes you have a little bit of fun with what you're doing. This is my conception of my parents' wedding back in the 40s. And we have grandparents that are buried in the cemetery out at Mount Ida Baptist Church. But this is what I believe their wedding was like based on conversation. My dad took the money from the cow, took those proceeds, and brought a ticket that took him to Rock Island, Illinois, where we had an uncle and aunt living. Now, people had to make a plan when you're leaving the South. You just can't get up and travel, you know, 500, 800 miles, 900 miles to go north without a plan. And so individuals tapped into others that have gone. And so as people go, networks are created to leave. And so that's how we got out. We stayed with them for the first part of being there. Dad was there first. The night riders actually came to the house, and they ransacked the place and damaged it and everything, but found no one there. My dad ultimately got a job working at a Chicken Delight restaurant, and he was kind of a buster, cleanup, and all that kind of stuff. And this restaurant, Chicken Delight, is just a block away from where later all of our family members would go to school, Davenport Central High School. And it was a segregated facility back in the 50s. And in the picture, you can see that person standing at the back door, that's my dad. He couldn't go through the front door. That's in Davenport, Iowa. And the white people are all in the front, the black people are in the back. But on the outside, people are mingling. Back in about 1990, that place was still in existence, and there was a lot of discussion about what to do with that building. It hadn't been a restaurant for a long time. Some wanted to keep it, and others wanted to tear it down because it was a symbol of racism. Ultimately, they tore it down. After a while, Dad had got enough money to send for us, and he did so, and the actual way that we got to the train station was two of my uncles rode in a wagon, took us in a wagon, covered the old wagon, and drove us to unbelievable. They had shotguns because they knew something could potentially happen. And that's how we left out. And our journey was what I call in the nose of Iowa. In my time, I always looked at that as an old man. Here, my mom is writing a letter to her sister, letting her know that we found a house that we're going to raise the children in. At that point, we had several running around besides the first four of us that were born. But that letter actually existed for a period of time, and I would have loved to have it, but it got burned in a fire that happened in my aunt's house. This is where the family ultimately moved into in 1955. It has an interesting history to it. It sits about a quarter of a mile from the Mississippi River. And the oldest resident there, we called him Old Man Curry. He said that people coming up from the south would come up from the Mississippi River, which was about a quarter of a mile away, and they would stay there until they could get an opportunity to go further up to Canada. Because you had to get to Canada to be free. You could be taken back to the south under the laws that they had at that time. And we actually found the covered well that existed in the kitchen of that area, which was part of the original building that was built in about 1840 something. And it was a dry well that connected to another well that was back out in the backyard. I kind of detail it here where it's at that tree, the impressions of that well were there still when we moved there. In my art, I like to have a little bit of fun with it. I have everything and everybody that up here is an actual person. Even the dog up in the very top, that's Bingo. We hated him. Yeah. And at the house, 1404 Christie Street, on the right, my brother and his wife are greeting me and my wife and son next to my 62 Galaxy, which I still have. But my father and mother and my four youngest sisters there are welcoming her sister and family. That would have never happened, because that's time. I've merged history in this. My father and mother have been dead. They died at 51 and 52 years old back in the 70s. And I also brought the grandparents here, but my grandfather on my mother's side was never there. He died 1 year before I was born. I was born in the shack behind the hospital in Greenville, and Black people couldn't be in the hospital. And my grandfather, the year before that, had died of what they called consumption. And my mother said that she could hear him breathing the entire time she was in delivery. That was a year before. So that's the family home, still in the family since 1955. This is a capturing of the family reunion that we had in 1994. That was the last time all of my brothers and sisters were together and alive. Since then, I've lost 2 sisters and a brother, my oldest brother and 2 of my younger sisters. So in Iowa, family got larger. We had a measure of security there. And I still experience systemic racism, you know, and my father was stifled with opportunities. He had a brilliant mind, you know, but he had a 6th grade education. He actually gave a commencement address at my college that I went to in the early 80s. He was a speaker during Black History Month. And one of the faculty members came up to him after he was done talking. He said, "Mr. Simmons, where'd you get your doctorate?" He said, "Son, I have a 6th grade education." The guy, mouth just dropped. But education was very important for my father, for all of us. So despite having left, we always went back because that was where we came from, and that is where we had grandparents and cousins and so on and so forth. And I call it the uncomfortable journey. You know, it's a very visceral feeling. We were packed in a station wagon, very much like that. It was red and white. And Mom would make these big baskets, grocery baskets, big brown baskets with chicken and biscuits with butter and syrup and jam on them and stuff like that. And you're rolling down there hungry as hell and wishing you could eat some of this stuff right then, you know? But it was always leave it out at like midnight after Dad got off work. And the idea is he wanted to drive as far as he could into the South so that he'd be there during the daytime when he's in the bulk of the South and can know what's going on. We were also given stern instructions about how to behave while we were in Alabama. Said, do not look at white people, do not touch them, you know, and kind of stay away if you can. And I remember as a 4-year-old, very visceral memory, Dad always told us, like I said, to stay close and so on. I got disconnected from them while we were in town walking. And I was looking at everything, you know, and everything, all the people, they're all white pretty much. And I lost my parents, or they lost me. I couldn't see them. I turned around, I ran right into a white woman and bumped her on the butt. I'm a little kid, you know, and the man just started cussing me and so on and so forth. And I ran as fast as far as I could and found my parents. Never told them what happened because I figured I'd be in trouble because my dad said, don't. So the why of my doing the book was really centered on really honoring my parents. They sacrificed much and died much too soon, much too soon. And, you know, my siblings, there's a whole 25-year span between the youngest and the oldest. And when we talk about going down home, they would say, well, what do you mean going down home? This is home. No, we lived there. And so I wanted them to have that story. And I wanted our generations to go beyond that. Our children and we have grandchildren now that understand what our heritage is and how we got where we are. and the tribute that we owe to our parents for that endeavor. And that's the title of the book that I wrote. It's Up from Down Home. We called it Up from Down Home because whenever we went back, we're going down home. So at some point you had to come up from it. And if you're interested in the book, it can be found at upfromdownhome.com, all one word. Thank you. I entertain any questions you might have.
Jevoid, that was wonderful. We have a microphone that we're going to have walk around and first take questions from the auditorium.
Okay, any questions? Okay.
Well, that art is just so exquisite. I'm wondering, did you say you exhibited it somewhere?
Yeah, in different places, Illinois Library, Noyes Cultural Arts Center, Civic Center. You know what? Actually, there's a few more slides. Grandparents,
Oh,
mom, pop, the siblings. That was the last time we were all together. We lost 2 and 3 since then. That's my son, wife.
who's the woman?
The woman in the middle, it's the woman I've been married to for about 40 years. And I have some other pictures there that are not, we don't need to go into those. So let's entertain questions here. Well, they're at a different focus. It's peace and justice, and it could go into a lot of discussion from there.
Okay.
Let me take a crack here. Jevoid, your paintings are more than paintings. They send messages, and they're wonderful.
Thank you.
And I think all of us here learned so much with them. So I have a couple questions.
Okay.
One is, you not only present something beautifully and we get an emotion with it, but you send a message. And the ones you showed us, each one has special meaning, not only to you, but now for us. What are you thinking about painting now? What messages are you wanting to work on, or are you working on? Can you help us understand that?
Like I said, they're more really doing a lot of stuff with peace and justice. I have some images there, but to go into them, it would be a broader discussion.
Well, give us an example of one that you might be working on.
Well, these are completed. Honoring Rodney King, rest in peace.
Oh, these are important.
This is called The Burial. And I completed this a year ago. But it's one where it's a call for people who look like you to really look at this thing called racism, and it exists even among ourselves. We have things that seem to be racist, like in the way we present. Light skin is good. Straight hair is better. Kinky hair is best because it stops a blow. I don't know. But this was a call, it was on display in Skokie, and it was a call for people who are white, who have a good heart, to really focus on burying privilege, racism, and supremacy. And in fact, it says that little kids are saying the time is now. And that's an in-group work. And Black people have in-group work that we have to do too. This is finding common ground. That's actually
Can we turn off the back light?
This is finding common ground, and that's me. And actually, this is a good friend of mine and my wife. Perry. He and his wife live in Arizona. But we all are so much more in common than not. We all have struggles. We all have challenges, and trying to find our way. And I think at the heart of things, we all feel the same things are important: family, our friends, our ability to have agency and be respected. And if we look closely, I think that we begin to understand those commonalities much better, and we are able to bridge gaps and to move from some of the insanity that we see today and understand that there's so much more that divides us when there is so much more that is common among all of us. We got to be up to the challenges of doing that work. I think this was actually in the flyer that went out. I was painting this, and it's always something I don't feel is quite complete yet, but it's kind of looking at American history, and it's looking at it from the Pilgrims to the natives, to the slaves, to the cotton, to the Civil War, and the War for Independence, and so on and so forth, down to the Supreme Court. Those who were slain, consider them to be martyrs. And so it's a panel of American history. That's some of what I'm doing.
That's wonderful. And thank you for sharing it. You are, in fact, somewhat of a teacher in what you're doing as well. I have a question. It's kind of tough one to ask. Our family comes from Sicilian roots in a very poor area, moving to dig coal in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of prejudice against Sicilians in that part of the world. Can't compare with what you have done, but at times some of us in the family say, well, it was tough, and it helped them become survivors in a way that they were stronger. And I do believe they were. I believe your family was, and I believe mine was. My question is, what about the next generation? Do you feel that you see any changes that suggest this struggle is getting easier? Or how do you feel about that?
Never has concerted effort to understand the peril that we exist in today never been so bad. I don't think at any point in our history. We challenge the very existence of whether or not government is legitimate. We challenge the votes that people make and say, it didn't happen. That's a dangerous place to be. And there's some discussion about every 250 years, the societies that become to a great place, like we did, come to prominence, that once they achieve that, they last about 250 years. And we're about 250 years into that now.
Jevoid, I just want to shake your hand. And I want to see if there are other questions. Arnie, please take this. I'm going to check the Zoom.
Thank you very much. Your presentation is very, very interesting and takes us back a long way too, in our own ways, hearing about all these things. But I wanted to know, did you go to art school?
I am actually education and sociology background. I went to art class in college at Western Illinois, and the first day the instructor said, I want you to do 15 line drawings and bring them back on Wednesday. I don't want to do line drawings, and I said, hey, this is my last day, first and last day.
Yeah.
So no, I never took art class, but I've always made art since I was very young.
Do you teach also now, or?
The only teaching that I do with art right now is Well, let me get very quickly. My trajectory is I worked in management capacities in the telephone company at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, where I actually met Amy, and the Art Institute of Chicago. That was the last 17 years of my work was there as an employee relations director. Never got to do the art thing from a work standpoint, and I'm glad for that.
Thank you.
Lady in the back, hold on. Take me out. I'm not as fast as I want to be.
Oh, stand up. Okay. Hi, Jevoid.
Hello.
I just went to the MCA and saw the Faith Ringgold exhibit. Does she inspire you, or did she? No.
No,
Okay.
no, I haven't seen the exhibit.
Okay.
My greatest muse is actually Grandma Moses.
Okay.
You know,
Makes sense.
and any art that's of that style, because it tells a story and it's about life. And any picture you see, it's life, whether it's the hayride or the turkey dinner and all that kind of stuff. It's a story.
Okay. I encourage you to go see it. You will love it. And in our staff lounge is a quilt of it. If any of the staff want to go see it.
Yes. For the book, it's all in one word, upfromdownhome.com.
Yeah, thank you. I already found it, but I thought other people might be wondering. So thank you. Oh, the website for his book.
Yeah, upfromdownhome.com.
Hold on.
It's just a technical, oil, wash, watercolor, tempera.
It's all acrylic.
Acrylic,
Yeah.
okay.
It dries quickly.
I would make a comment that just a moment that I went to work in Cleveland in White County in Georgia in 1965, soon after Schwerner and them were killed, and I experienced the white and color. I went to a water fountain. It was the wrong water fountain.
Mhm.
And the camp that I worked at had black counselors that were on the staff of our Jewish camp that I worked at. And the overwhelming racism that was evident in the community was palpable. I mean, it was just overwhelming. And one, including myself, I was not safe to be in the community, even though I was a white person, but I was there with black counselors who were with me, and we were doing wrong, apparently, according to the people that were there in the community, and it was overwhelmingly palpable. The hate, you could feel it.
Yeah.
And the safety, being not in a large group of 5 or 6 males to protect ourselves was overwhelming.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of white people risk a great deal, including life, and the young man that was with the 3 that were lynched.
Yeah, I understand. There was a question. Let me get this gentleman.
There is a school of art called American art. Do you consider yourself to have or to be in that school?
Not that I know of.
Very, very plain and no perspective. And
Well, I consider myself a folk artist. That's the best I can think. And it is American folk art.
So you talked a lot about your paintings. You showed your paintings. Can you tell us about your carvings?
I started, well, I think about the first thing I made out of wood was a car when I was in kindergarten. But I've always, I built doll houses. I do have some dolls actually that, a lot of guys probably would say that's weird, but I always liked dolls. I like Raggedy Ann dolls particularly. I have one that rides with me in my 62 Galaxy because my wife won't ride in it. So I put her in there. But anyway, I don't digress. What question?
Hello.
Yes.
So your book, is that a story about your experiences growing up in Iowa?
It tells about my life, our life in Iowa, what happened to us. Talks about, it's not a long read. It's about 55 pages long. It is really an art book that tells a story. And so there's a written narrative as it goes.
So do you have your pictures, your paintings in there and you talk about them?
Yeah, every painting is you saw most of them right there, but they're in the book.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And those paintings will be on display here starting in January, toward the end of January, and carvings as well. But you said something about carvings? Yeah. Oh, carvings. A lot of family, my brothers and sisters, uncles and some aunts. I have carved Civil War images. And again, it's in a simplistic kind of a style. And I'll have those carvings, at least of my direct family and some uncles and aunts and grandparents, here on display as well. So it is definitely folk art. Yes.
I'm sorry.
I said, have you shown your paintings to young people and what is their response?
Well, I've showed it to young people. I've done a run through with younger folks in one of my exhibits at Noise, just kind of a spot walk through. But also, I volunteer with young Black and brown boys in Evanston, at-risk boys, and there's a summer camp called Camp Kumba that runs for different grades. I actually have expanded to girls. I don't deal with the girls. There's women that do that. But I teach art. I use art to help them express and identify themselves and, project who they are to the world, to build esteem, but doing this with art. And that's, it's like a 3-week camp.
I think you're going to be staying here, and then if anyone had a question, they could come up and see you on that. A couple questions about your what you do. Will you have any of your sculptures here?
Yeah,
and your paintings too?
Yeah, the 17 paintings will be here, and
are any of them going to be on sale?
No.
Okay.
Those belong to the collective of Simmons.
Okay.
But I do have prints. For 3 of the major paintings, I do have prints of those.
And those will be available?
Yeah, they could be available.
Okay.
But they're largest, like that, acrylic paintings.
Just one other thought. When I saw your paintings, I thought of Grandma Moses, but you're way too young. So, and you're an epitome of, I guess you're a senior. You're not retired.
I'm 72 years old. I'm retired.
You're never going to be retired because you're always going to do what you love, right?
Exactly.
And that's true of everybody here. So I'm going to turn this over to Bob.
Before we close, just want to remind everybody, next meeting is January 2nd. So this ain't happening for a couple of weeks. So wish everybody a happy holiday season. Look forward to seeing you next year. And thanks for being here. Up.
I just, so Jevoid said his artwork will be on display January and February. It will. Sorry. And then on February 7th, we are having a Meet the Artist reception where he's going to come back again and from 4 to 6. So if you would like to go to that, it's in the winter magazine catalog. You can check it out and RSVP to that.
Thanks. Jevoid, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Really